Good night, everyone. Almost went to bed without reading the chapter, well, the 10 minutes for today. So let's get this 10 minutes and then I'm heading to bed. Mary Ellen's pleasant move when she arrived in San Francisco was shrewd by unspectacular. Those whom she made money off likely did not even know she existed. As a woman and an African American, she had been discriminated against and overlooked most of her life. By the time she had arrived in San Francisco, she had learned to work in the background. Moving out west allowed her to keep an eye on her new husband, grow her bequest, and make plans without drawing any more attention to herself than necessary. But what was she planning on for the long run? Life in California was profitable, but she missed the home and the struggle back east. There had to be a purpose to it all, besides keeping tabs on JJ. Pleasant was disconnected from her old life, but she willed what pieces of her home she could to her surroundings. She socialized with other Nantucketers and Bostonians. She made her favorite dishes, serving pineapple upside down cake and honey baked ham for friends at the private dinners and banquets. She catered for extra income. She corresponded long distance with friends. She also made special efforts to produce abolitionist periodicals such as William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator and Frederick Douglass's Paper from the East. In the spring of 1852, as her wealth increased, Frederick Douglass's paper printed a series of essays on black wealth. The series by James McCune Smith, a public intellectual and the first African American to earn a medical degree, pondered whether free blacks should use their liberty to pursue wealth, abolition, and civil rights. 100,000. $100,000 black men would be no better than $100,000 white men, he wrote. Gold freezes up the humanities. Gold freezes up the humanities and all their surroundings. The wealthy are never a progressive class. They are by necessary conservatives. That is true. Because when you do get wealthy, you don't really. Anyway. In one installment, Smith compared Samuel Rington Ward, an abolitionist, and Jeremiah Hamilton, the richest black man in New York, asking who was the better man. Ward was the abolitionist whom Pleasant knew through his nephew, Reverend Thomas Marcus Decatur Ward. He lived in San Francisco and presided over the African American Methodist Episcopal Church, where Pleasant worshipped. Hamilton was a free black man, and like Pleasant, he was an investor. He was worth at least $500,000 and lived in a brownstone in Lower Manhattan. Hamilton shunned abolitionist causes and, like Pleasant's first husband, defined his race as Cuban. Compare Sam Ward with the only black millionaire in New York, Jerry Hamilton. And it is plain that manhood is a nobler ideal than money. The former has illustrated his people and his country, the other has fled it from his identity. To use the elegant phraseology of Ethiop, like a dog with a tin kettle tied to his tail. Wealth and activism were binary characteristics, Smith argued in his United States' most distributed black newspaper of the antebellum period. One could either seek liberation or seek wealth, not both. As she often did when she presented with two conflicting ideas, Pleasant harmonized them as one she could. She set her mind to pursue wealth, but to the end of using money, she made seek liberation for slaves, and she had promised her husband to do. As she has promised her husband to do. Around the time that Smith printed his treatises on Hamilton and Ward, Pleasant began to become interested in a name she saw printed in the papers, John Brown. John Brown was the most belligerent opponent of slavery since Nat Turner early in the century. He was a white shepherd and Calvinist preacher who believed that God wanted him to bring an end to slavery. He first made headlines when he founded an army security force in Springfield, Massachusetts, called the League of Gileadites, the local branch of the national organization to defend runaway slaves. William Wells Brown, an acquaintance of Pleasant, wrote of encountering the League of Gileadites on a visit to Springfield. We found there some 10 or 15 blacks, and all armed to the teeth and swearing vengeance upon their heads on any who should attempt to take them. In 1854, President Franklin Pierce, an anti-abolitionist Democrat, signed the Kansas-Nebraska Act into law, sending slavery opponents into a fury. The law, authored by Illinois Senator Stephen A. Douglas, created the territories of Kansas and Nebraska, but also allowed for the expansion of slavery into the North, where it had been banned since 1819. Slavery would be permitted or banned in Kansas and Northern Territory based on a popular vote among white males in the territory. The law would potentially reintroduce slavery into the North, endangering freedmen and women and reinforcing slavery's grip on America. Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison published angry treatises against it in their paper. On the steps of the courthouse in Peoria, Illinois, a large unknown politician named Abraham Lincoln gave a 3-hour speech decrying the law. I hate it because of the monstrous injustice of slavery itself. I hate it because it deprives our Republican example of its just influence in the world, he told hundreds of onlookers. Afterwards, his Peoria speech became a thing of legend that catapulted him into a national prominence. Pleasant kept abreast of the developments. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery supporters rushed into the territory to try to influence the outcome, and the tug-of-war eventually became violent. Brown's name reappeared in the paper when he and his sons went to Kansas to lead the fight during Bleeding Kansas, a battle between slave owners and abolitionists. After rumors circulated that he had a kid during Bleeding Kansas, he surfaced with an essay entitled Parallels that was published in several abolitionist papers. On Sunday, the 19th of December, a Negro called Jim came over to the Osage settlement from Missouri and stated that he, together with his wife, 2 children, and another Negro man, were to be sold within a day or 2 and begged for help to get away. On Monday, the following night, 2 small companies were made up to go to Missouri and forcibly liberate the 5 slaves together with other slaves. One of these companies I assumed to direct. We proceeded to the place, surrounded the buildings, liberated the slaves, and also took certain property supposed to belong to the estate. We, however, learned before leaving that a portion of the articles we had taken belonged to a man living on the plantation as a tenant, and who was supposed to have no interest in the estate. We promptly returned to him all we had taken. We then went to another plantation where we freed 5 more slaves and took some property and 2 white men. We moved very slowly away into the territory for some distance and then sent the white men back, telling them to follow as soon as they chose to do so. The other company freed 1 female slave, took some property, and as I am informed, killed 1 white man, the master, who fought against the liberation. Now for a comparison, 11 persons were sorry for the vulgar language. 11 persons were forcibly restored to their natural and inalienable rights, with but not 1 man killed, and all hell stayed from beneath. It is currently reported that the governor of Missouri has made a requisition upon the governor of Kansas for the delivery of such as were concerned in the last named dreadful outrage. The marshal of Kansas is said to be collecting a pose of Missouri, not Kansas men, at West Point in Missouri, little town about 10 miles distant, to enforce the law. All pro-slavery, conservative, free state, and dual-faced men administration tools are filled with holy horror. Brown took the slave he freed to Ontario and then disappeared into hiding. Shortly after Brown published Parallels, Pleasant considered leaving San Francisco for the free black settlement in Ontario. There, she hoped she could learn how to find him. I had no well-defined idea of just how I was to help John, and concluded to see what could be done after I reached Canada, she recalled. As Pleasant was making plans to help Brown strike a blow against slavery, the rights of the minorities in California were eroding. The pull of California's prosperity made it diverse, drawing people from all races, regions, and backgrounds to San Francisco. Many white men, however, saw the Hispanics, blacks, and Chinese immigrants who were present in large numbers in the city as stealers of white men's jobs and opportunities. Minorities were blamed for the city's crime and forced to live in ghettos, while taxes and legal restriction on immigrants were made into law. In a landmark case in 1854, The California Supreme Court passed a law that banned blacks, Indians, and Chinese from testifying against white men in court. The ruling coincided with a high-profile lawsuit, Folsom versus Lidersloff, in which the family of the deceased black millionaire industrialist William Lidersloff was suing the prominent white Californian Joseph Folsom. Lidersloff's family claimed that Folsom had conned them into signing off over the Lidersloff estate to him. Lidersloff black family members' testimony in the suit was deemed inadmissible, making mounting a case difficult. That's crazy. Pleasant donated to the effort to overturn the laws that disenfranchised minorities, but kept a focus on the bigger fight, the struggle to end slavery. All right, guys, I'm tired. Good night. Pieces.